List of French women writers. This is a list of women writers born in France or whose writings are closely associated with France. Juliet Adam, 1836–1936, novelist, nonfiction writer, magazine editor. Marie Dagelt, pen name Daniel Stern, 1805–1876, novelist, essayist, history writer. And Marie Albiach, 1937–2012, poet, translator, poet, translator, poet, translator, poet, translator, poet, translator, poet, translator, Hortense Allard, 1801–1879, feminist writer, essayist. Almax de Castelnau, 12th century, troubadour poet writing in Occitan. Catherine Dambois, 1475–1550, semi-autobiographical novelist, poet. Virginie Ancelot, 1792–1875, painter, playwright. Christine Angot, born 1959, novelist, playwright. Azalea Darbaud, 1834–1917, Occitan language writer. Sophie d'Arbouville, 1810–1850, poet, short story writer. Catherine Arley, pen name of Pierrette Pernot, born 1924, novelist, actress. Angelique Arnaud, 1799–1884, novelist, essayist, feminists. Madeline de l'Aubespine, 1546–1596, poet, literary patron, one of the earliest female erotic poets. Gwenaëlle Aubry, born 1971, novelist, philosopher, nonfiction writer. Colette Aubry, 1906–1990, novelist, screenwriter, critic. Marie Catherine d'Aulnoy-Six, 1650–1705, writer of fairy tales, historical novels. Félicie d'Isaac, 1801–1881, poet, art historian. Azalée de Porquerolles, 12th century, Occitan language troubadour. Victoire Babois, 1760–1839, writer of elegies. Marie-Claire Bancort, 1932–2019, poet, essayist, critic, educator. Essayist, critic, educator. Tristan Banon, born 1979, novelist, journalist, television presenter. Arved Barin, 1840–1908, nonfiction writer, historian, literary critic. Natalie Clifford Barney, 1876–1972, American-born poet, playwright, novelist, wrote mainly in French. Lauren Bastide, born 1981, French journalist, stylist. Sophie Bauer, 1773–1860, playwright, nonfiction writer. Fanny de Beauharnais, 1737–1813, poet, novelist, playwright, Salinist, Leninist. Simone de Beauvoir, 1908–1986, novelist, essayist, existentialist, philosopher, feminist. Beatrix Beck, 1914–2008, novelist, short story writer, poet of Belgian origin. Alice Becker Ho, born 1941, poet, nonfiction writer. Claude de Bectas, 1490–1547, poet, letter writer. Geraldine Beg-Better, novelist, screenwriter. Maud de Bellarach, 1922–2017, best-selling novelist, memoirist, biographer. Lowell Bellin, 1925–1999, actress and playwright. Yannick Bellin, 1924–2019, film director and screenwriter, screenwriter. Juliette Benzoni, 1920–2016, novelist. Catherine Bernard, 1662–1712, poet, playwright, novelist. Paulette Burnage, 1896–1973, journalist, housework specialist, prolific nonfiction writer. Emmanuel Bernheim, 1955–2017, novelist, screenwriter. Carmen Bernos de Gastolde, 1919–1995, Louise Burton, 1805–1877, composer, poet. Muriel Best, 1943–2005, novelist, often featuring lesbian characters. Nella Bielski, born 1930s, Ukrainian-born French novelist, actress. Giselle Bayen, born 1946, novelist, writer for young adults. Rahel Bilatu, born 1951, novelist. Augustine Melvin Ablanchikov, 1830–1897, poet. Marie Bonaparte Wise, 1831–1902, novelist, playwright. Louise de Beaussigny, died 1700. Fairy tale writer. Lawrence Baughel, 1970–2018, poet, essayist, travel writer. Catherine de Bourbon, 1559–1604, princess, poet, letter writer. Louise Bourbonnais c. 1847–1915, writer, explorer, philanthropist. Jean Bouvier, 1865–1964, feminist, trade unionist. Sarah Baughel, born 1968, novelist, film director. Nina Barayoui, born 1967, novelist, lists. Downia Boozer, born 1964, anthropologist, writer. Marie and de Bovet, 1855, unknown date, novelist, journalist, lists. And Sophie Brasmy, born 1984, novelist, stylist. Genevieve Brissac, born 1951, novelist, short story writer, children's writer, critic, screenwriter. Joseph Bruce, 1920–1996, Polish-born novelist, stylist. André Brunin, 1937–1993, poet, many works set to music. C. E. 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 Claude Cahun, 1894–1954, poet, novelist, photograph, essayist, translator, resistant. Nina de Callias, 1843–1884, poet, Salinist. Amélie Julie Candale, 1767–1834, composer, librettist, playwright. Marcel Caby, 1891–1962, novelist, journalist, pacifist. Marie Cardinal, 1929–2001, novelist, Castellosa, 13th century, troubadour poet. Claire Castellan, born 1975, novelist, playwright. And Marie Casales, 1920–1988, journalist, poet, essayist, novelist, actress. Charlotte Rose de Caumont de la Force, 1654–1724, successful novelist, poet, memoirist. Rosine de Chabot, latter 1794–1860, translator. Francois Chandernather, born 1945, novelist, playwright. Edmond Charles Roux, 1920–2016, novelist, journalist, photographer. Noel Chatelet, born 1944, essayist, novelist, short story writer, educator, story writer, educator, educator. Chantal Chaouaf, born 1943, novelist, essayist. Madeline Chapsell, born 1925, novelist, poet, critic. Charlotte Saumaise de Chazen, 1916–84, poet and salon attendee. Elizabeth Sophie Cheron, 1648–1711, painter, poet, translator, poet. translator, 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 poet, translator, translator. Marais Choisy, 1903–1979, philosopher, novelist, non-fiction writer. Helene Sixis, born 1937, Algerian-born French novelist, poet, playwright, philosopher, critic, feminist writer. Catherine Clement, born 1939, philosopher, novelist, feminist, critic, 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 critic. Gabriel de Coignard, 1550–1586, religious poet. Louise Collett, 1810–1876, poet, novelist, Salinist. Collett, 1873–1954, novelist, author of Jiggy, of Jiggy, here, of Jiggy, of Jiggy. Henriette de Coligny de Lassus, 1873, poet, and Hyacinthe de Colleyville, 1824, novelist, playwright. Daniel Collobert, 1940–1978, poet, novelist, short story writer, journalist, lists. Rose Camet, 1883–1932, novelist. Sophie Ristaud Cotton, 1770–1807, novelist, several historical novels. Hyacinthe de Crenne, 1510–1552, novelist, epistolary writer, translator, writer, translator, translator, writer, translator, epistolary writer, translator, writer, translator, writer, translator, list, epistolary writer, translator, Pauline Marie Armand Craven, 1808–1891, nonfiction writer. D. Jocelyn Dacia, born 1959, French historian, anthropologist and academic. Gilbert H. Dallas, pen name of Gilbert Herschel, 1918–1960, poet, important member of the Poets Modets. Marie Darrieussecq, born 1969, novelist. Countess Dash, pen name of Gabriel and Cistern de Courtiers, Vicomtesse de Saint Mars, 1804–1872, novelists. The two novelists. Rigen de Forges, 1935–2014, novelist, short story writer, essayist, playwright. Alex de Laporte, born 1969, film director, screenwriter. Lucy de la Rue Mardris, 1874–1945, poet, novelist, journalist, sculptor. Florence Delay, born 1941, novelist, essayist, playwright, translator, actress. Sylvie Denis, born 1963, novelist, magazine editor, translator, editor, translator, editor, translator, editor, translator, editor, translator, editor, translator, translator, editor, translator, translator, editor, translator, translator, editor, Maria de Racemes, 1828–1894, playwright, essayist, women's rights activists, vivists. Marceline Desbordes Vilmore, 1786–1859, poet, novelist, novelists. Antoinette des Houliers, 1638–1694, poet. Marie and Desmarest, 1904–1973, Marie, novelist, lists. Catherine des Roches, 1542–1587, Renaissance poet, daughter of Madeleine des Roches. Madeline des Roches, c. 1520–1587, Renaissance poet, mother of Catherine des Roches. Madeline Discutery, 1873–1939, Breton poet, novelist, playwright, short story writer. Jean Duroin, 1805–1894, journalist, women's activist after the Revolution. Dominique de Santi, 1920–2011, journalist, novelist, biographer, educator, biographer, educator. Agnes Dessart, born 1966, children's writer, novelists, novelist, novelists, stylists. Marceline Desbordes Vilmore, 1786–1859, poet. Madeline Discutery, born 1959, novelist, and disclosed 1907–1998, journalist, novelist, translator, known under pen names Paulin Rege and Dominique Aurier. Madeline Discutery, 1873–1939, Breton language poet, novelist, Regine Deforges, 1935–2014 best-selling novelist, editor, director, playwright, known for her erotic works. Antoinette Deshouliers, 1638–1694, P4 poet. Virginie Despentes, born 1969, novelist, autobiographical works. Marie Desplechin, born 1959, successful novelist, children's writer. Jane D. Lafoy, 1851–1916, archaeologist, novelist, journalist. Genevieve Dorman, 1933–2015, journalist, novelist. Pernette du Gillet, c. 1520–1545, Renaissance poet. Caroline Dubois, born 1960, poet. Charlotte W. born 1940, novelist, filmmaker, screenwriter. Catherine Duffer, born 1966, novelist. Claire de Dures, 1777–1828, novelist, author of Auricuk. Marguerite Duras, 1914–1996, novelist, playwright, screenwriter of Hiroshima Mon Amour. Vanessa Duries, 1972–1993, novelist, author of The Ties That Bind. Yvette Duval, 1931–2006, Moroccan-born French historian specializing in ancient North Africa. Francois Chandernather, 1922–2005, feminist essayist, science fiction novelist, novelist. Alexandrine des Echerels, 1779–1850, memoirists. Catherine Enjollet, French novelist and essayist. Annie Ernaux, born 1940, autobiographical novelist. Claire Echerelli, born 1934, novelist. Genevieve Fauconnier, 1886–1969, novelists. Novelist. Madame de Lafayette, 1634–1693, novelist, author of La Princesse de Cleves. Amanda Filipacchi, born 1967, French-born American novelist, Adelaide Filial, 1761–1836, novelist, one of the most distinguished writers of her times. Clara Filial, 1822–1878, painter and children's writer. Zenate Fleuriot, 1829–1890, prolific novelist writing for young women. Pierrette Fliuchiox, 1941–2019, novelist, short story writer. Bridget Fontaine, born 1939. Vivienne Forrester, 1925-2013, essayist, novelist, critic. Jean-Justine Foucault de Pussy, 1786-1863, author of children's and educational works. Jocelyn Francois, born 1933, lesbian novelist, poet, diarist. G. E. Marie-Louise Gagner, 1832-1902, essayist, novelist, and feminist. Jean Galsey, 1883-1977, novelist, biographer. Anne-Marie Garrett, born 1946, novelist. Anne F. Garrett, born 1962, novelist. Judith Gautier, 1845-1917, poet, historical novelist, playwright, translator, music critic. Anna Gavelda, born 1970, best-selling novelist, short story writer, works widely translated. Sophie Gay, 1776-1852, novelist, playwright, librettist. Stephanie Felicite, Comtesse de Genlis, 1746-1830, novelist, playwright, children's writer. Rosamond Gerard, 1871-1953, poet, playwright. Sylvie Germain, born 1954, novelist, essayist, biographer. Amélie Gex, 1835-1883, poet, also wrote in Franco-Provençal. Delphine de Girardin, 1804-1855, essayist, poet, novelist, stylist. And Gallen, 1921-2017, novelist, author of the Angelique series of historical novels. Melanie Galby, active since 2011, journalists. Olympe de Gouges, 1748-1793, playwright, feminist writer, executed after the Revolution. Marie de Gournay, 1585-1645, novelist, essayist, critic. Francois de Graffigny, 1695-1758, novelist, playwright. Eveline Grangian, born 1939, actress, playwright, screenwriter, Henry Greville, pen name of Alice Durand, 1842-1902, widely translated novelist. Benoit Grout, 1920-2016, novelist, feminists. Claudine Guérin de Tenson, 1682-1749, literary patron, novelist, letter writer. Pernette du Gillet, c. 1520-1545, poet, most of her works intended to be set to music as songs. Beatrice Hammer, born 1963, novelist, children's writer, playwright. Meyeril Havitt, 1898-1932, poet, diarist, novelist. Nathalie Henneberg, 1910-1977, science fiction novelist. Catherine Hermery Veal, born 1943, novelist. Adele Hammer de Hell, 1819-1883, explorer and travel writer. J. A. Paula Jacques, born 1949, Egyptian-born French novelist, journalist, radio host. Gail Joss, born 1960, poet, novelist, lists. K. Fabienne Canner, born 1970, journalist, novelist, filmmaker. Maëlys de Carangal, born 1967, novelist. Nadia Yalakasukity, born 1978, philosopher. Therese Kuo Malkouri, born 1938, Cameroon-born French novelist, essayist. essayists, essayists. L. and Alain Roch-Guilhem 1644–1710, novelist, moved to England. Sylvie Lane, born 1957, science fiction novelist, short story writer. Jean Lapause 1860–1920, born Jean Loiseau, poet, novelist, used the pen name Daniel Lesueur c. Permanent dead link Loiseau at www.daniellesueur.com 1854–1921. Camille Laurens, born 1957, novelist, novelist, novelists. Linda Le, born 1963, Vietnamese-born French novelist. Simone Lebargy, 1877–1985, actress, novelist, memoirist. Martine Lacaze, born 1955, novelist, poet, nonfiction writer. Violet Lennox, 1907–1972, best-selling novelist, autobiographer. Jean-Marie Leprince de Beaumont, 1711–1780, novelist, fairy tale writer, author of Beauty and the Beasts. M. Jean Marny, 1854–1910, novelist, playwright, essayists, and Marquise c. 1533–1588, religious poet, nun, author of Les Sonnets Spirituels. Agnes Martin Lugand, born 1979, bestseller novelist. Sophie Massieu, born 1975, journalist, Renee Massif, 1907–2002, novelist, journalist. Nicole Claude Mathieu, 1937–2014, sociologist specializing in gender studies. Melvin, pen name of Francine Rosic, 1911–1992, Breton language poet, novelist, playwright. Netecha Mitchell, born 1941, political activist, novelist, critic. Mary Jane Minnebury, 1926–2017, children's poet, short storyer. Jane Bismee, 1865–1935, journalist, feminists. Ursule Molinaro, 1916–2000, French-American novelist, playwright, translator, wrote in French and English, and English, and English, and English, and English, and English, and Englishish, and English, and English, and English, and English, and Englishish, and English, and English, and English, and English. Kenise Murad, born 1939, journalist, nonfiction writer, and novelist. N. Marguerite de Navarre, 1492–1549, poet, playwright, short story writer, author of the short story collection Heptameron. Marie Ndiaye, born 1967, novelist, playwright. Anna de Noailles, 1876–1933, highly acclaimed novelist, poet, autobiographer. Florence Neuville, born 1961, journalist, children's writer, novelist, nonfiction writer. Veronique Only, born 1962, novelist, playwright, short story writer. Mona Ozouf, born 1931, historian, philosopher. P. Catherine Pankel, born 1954, best-selling novelist, journalist, author of Les Yeux Jaunes des Crocodiles, The Yellow Eyes of Crocodiles. Madeline Pelletier, 1874–1939, feminist writer. Georges de Peyrebrun, 1841–1917, prolific novelist, columnist, feminist. and Plichota, born 1968, children's writer, novelist, novelists. Maria Pagnon, 1844–1925, writer, journal editor, feminist, suffragist and pacifist. Aliénor de Poitiers, 15th century, writer on court etiquette. Alice Paulo, 1885–1960, travel writer, geographer. Racold, pen name of Marguerite Vellet Emery, 1860–1953, novelist, non-fiction writer, author of Monsieur Venus, Sieur Venus. Geneviève Francois Randon de Malboissier, 1746–1766, playwright, poet, multilingual translator. Paulin Reege, pen name of undisclosed, 1907–1998, who also used the pen name Dominique Ory, novelist, editor, critic, author of Story of Histoire d'eau. Marie Redonnet, pen name of Martine L. Hospitalier, born 1948, poet, novelist, essayist, short story writer, playwright. Christine Renard, 1929–1979, science fiction novelists, Yasmina Reza, born 1959, playwright, novelist, actress, screenwriter, author of God of Carnage. Marie-Jean Riccoboni, 1714–1792, novelist, editor, novelist, editor. Catherine Rehoit, born 1950, novelist, biographer. Christine de Revoyer, 1921–2019, novelist, journalist. Antoinette Henriette Clements Roberts, 1797–1872, novelist, playwright. Nina Roberts, born 1979, erotic novelist, actress. Tatiana de Rosnay, born 1961, journalist, best-selling novelist, screenwriter. Marie and Aramia Roberts, 1705–1771, early science fiction novelist. Pascal Rose, born 1954, playwright, novelist, author of Sarah's Key El Asapelate Leni Rouzaide, 1839–1916, journalist, novelist, and feminist. Francois Sagan, 1935–2004, playwright, novelist, screenwriter, author of Bonjour Tristesse. Veffe de Saint-Pierre, 1872–1967, explorer, reporter, Breton language poet, children's writer. Lydie Salvaire, born 1948, novelist, works widely translated. George Sand, 1804–1876, novelist, playwright, author of Indiana. And de Séguier, 16th-century French poet and salon holder. Nathalie Sarraute, 1900–1999, Russian-born French novelist, pioneer of the Nouveau Roman. Albertine Sarrazin, 1937–1967, French-Algerian novelist, essayist, poet. Simone Schwarzbart, born 1938, Guadeloupean French novelist, playwright, nonfiction writer. And Scott, born 1965, novelist, short story writer. Madeline Discutery, 1607–1701, novelist, works containing lengthy conversations. Countess of Ségur, 1799–1874, Russian-born French novelist, children's writer. Eulalie de Seneca 1791–1876, journalist, novelist, children's writer. Colleen Serra born 1947, actress, film director, playwright, essayists. Marie de Rabutin-Chantal, Marquise de Savine 1626–1696, letter writer. Shen Sa, pen name of Yan Nai born 1972, Chinese-born French poet, novelist, painter, now writing in French. Germaine de Staël, also Madame de Staël 1766–1817, essayist, novelist, non-fiction writer, Salonist. Louise Swanton Belloc 1796–1881, translator, essayist, novelist, non-fiction writer, children's book writer, feminist. T. Tibers de Saranum 12th century, troubadour poet, writing in Occitan. Chantal Thomas born 1945, historian, novelist, stylist. Edith Thomas 1909–1970, novelist, historian, journalist, journalists. Vils Thomas, pen name of Iliane Taib 1929–1985, science fiction novelist, stylist. Annette Tisson born 1942, architect, children's writer, co-creator of Barbapapa. Valerie Toranian born 1962, journalist, editor of LL. Nicole Turner 1950–2011, novelist, children's writer. Elsa Triolet 1896–1970, Russian-born French novelist, first women to win the Prix Bancort, wrote in Russian and French. Nadine Trintignant born 1934, film editor, writer, director, producer, and novelist. Flora Tristan 1803–1844, socialist writer, feminists. V. E. Valerie Valor 1961–1981, best-selling autobiographical novelist. Fred Vargas, pen name of Frederic Audouin Rousseau born 1957, best-selling crime fiction writer, historian. Delphine de Vigan born 1966, best-selling novelist, author of Noët-moi translated into 20 languages. Marie Catherine de Villedieu 1640–1683, playwright, novelist, short story writer. Gabrielle Suzanne Barbot de Villeneuve c. 1695–1755, novelist, fairy tale writer, author of Belle et la Bête. Louise Levick de Vilmore in 1902–1969, novelist, poet, journalist. Renée Vivian 1877–1909, British-born French-language poet, often writing autobiographical verse. Elizabeth von Arburg born 1947, science fiction novelist, Simone Weil 1909–1943, philosopher, non-fiction works. And Wyazemsky 1947–2017, German-born French novelist, actress. Joel Wintrebert born 1949, science fiction novelist, children's writer. Monique Wittig 1935–2003, novelist, playwright, feminist writer. Sandrine Wolfe born 1969, children's writer, collaborates with Amplichoter. Y. Marguerite Yourcenar 1903–1987, novelist and essayist. Z. E. Leontine Zanti, 1872–1942, novelist, feminists.